Alright everyone, welcome to Q&A Social Security Disability Today Special Edition. Today, our Special Edition question focuses on the medical vocational guidelines. I had a very special question. As always, I stress to everyone, if you have a question that you'd like me to spend sole attention on, just one, then I ask you to specify exactly what it is that you need me to address. I've had a gentleman today ask me to provide some information about the medical vocational guidelines as it relates to age, education, and work experience. And so I want to do so here today. I hope this helps you out and enjoy. Alright everyone, let's get started with the first component. Let's talk about age. Again, let me give you the breakdown. I always like to do so before I start of the 5-step sequential evaluation process that Social Security currently uses. First step they look at is, are you working? And if you're not working, they want to know if the reason you're not working is because of step 2, which means you have a significant impairment or impairments, or a combination of both, mental and health, that keeps you out of work 12 months or more. If the answer is yes, then the next question is, do any of those conditions meet the criteria of listed medical conditions found in the listings of medical conditions by Social Security? If the answer is no, then you move on to the 4th step, which is looking at your limitations from your medical conditions, along with your age, education, and work experience. Could you go back to do anything that you used to do in the last 15 years? And then, if you can't, can you do anything else? A lot of times the medical and vocational guidelines, which we affectionately refer to in the Social Security industry as the GRIDS, is more applicable to the 5th step. It's usually when the GRIDS come in. Because if they believe that your limitations or the condition that you have would give you the ability to go back to do the work that you used to do, then of course you're denied at step 4. Step 5 has to deal with other work. And typically Social Security, once they have your medical condition, they're now going to start looking at your limitations. Then they start utilizing 3 particular criteria. I tell people all the time that here's the things that you need to realize with regards to that. Let's take one each step at a time with age. I know it was a long-winded lead-in. Let's get it cracking. For purposes of Social Security, as an adult, there really are 4 distinctive age categories. There is younger individuals, which is 49 and below. There is closely approaching advanced age, which is 50 to 54. There is advanced age, which is 55 to 59, and then there's closely approaching retirement age, which I believe is 60 to 64. Rule of thumb, I tell people all the time, is that if you're under the age of 50, Social Security typically will determine that your age is not a factor that they consider in the course of determining your vocational guidelines. I'm going to read to you exactly what it says in the regulations. If you are a younger person, which is under the age of 50, we generally do not consider that your age will seriously affect your ability to adjust to other work. People, the age criteria wholeheartedly is relied upon for the purposes of determining your ability to adjust to other work. So if you're young, you can just wrap it up. Now let's go to the other categories. 50, of course, 50 to 54 is closely approaching advanced age. 55 to 59, of course, is advanced age, and then 60 to 64 is closely approaching retirement age. Here's the rule of thumb that I tell people. As you get into each bracket above the age of 50, and as you notice there's 3 of them, as you get to each bracket above the age of 50, age becomes a more significant factor that Social Security relies upon in order to determine whether you are able to adjust to other work. In other words, if you're 55 or 56, it is assumed that your ability to adjust to work is a little bit more hampered than if you were 51 or 52. There's even a special category if you're between 60 to 64. If you're closely approaching retirement age, which is 60 and older, and they don't think you can do anything more than just light work, then they're going to determine that the skills are transferable only if they're transferable to the exact job that you are similar to what you had previously done. So keep that thought in the back of your mind. biggest thing you need to know is that the regulations have been set up so that the older you are, and this is not a knock on people who are older, this is not discrimination or anything. The idea is, you remember, when you're hitting your 50s and you're in late 50s, early 60s, you've been in the workforce probably about a good 30 to 40 years at that particular point. And so your ability to adjust to other work may be significantly hampered by the fact that you've kind of been acclimated to certain ways of doing things, so your ability to adjust might be hampered. Okay, everyone, let's get down to the education portion of it. Really, at the end of the day, there's really 5 things that you need to be aware of. For education purposes, you're either considered illiterate, which means you're unable to read or write. For the most part, it's basically an inability to read or write. Marginal is less than the 6th grade. Limited is 6th through 11th grade. And then, of course, high school education is high school graduate or GED and above. Kind of keep it in your back of your mind is this. And this is what I tell people all the time. The less education you have, the more difficult it is for you to be able to acquire additional skills or be able to learn additional things. That's kind of the presumption Social Security takes, that you will be hampered because of your limited educational background. It's almost like the criteria that I mentioned with the age, but it goes backwards, meaning the less education you have, the more of a factor it is relied upon for Social Security to your favor. So guess what? If I got a college degree, my educational factor is going to be less of an impact as opposed to somebody who has a 5th grade education. In other words, they're going to have a lot harder time finding a job with a 5th grade education than me with a college degree. Also, what's considered part of an educational factor, and this pops up a lot with those persons who don't speak English. Social Security typically takes in consideration your ability to speak English as well. This comes up a lot when you have individuals who come over here and have English as a secondary language and they don't know how to speak English at all. They don't even have English as a secondary language. They're learning English as a secondary one. So Social Security typically considers the language as a part of the educational component. Alright, let's get down to the work portion of this. At the end, I'm going to try to see if I can break this down so that it's not as confusing. So please forgive me if by some odd reason it is not confusing. I'll be more than happy to address it again if I am. There are 3 types of categories of work that you do. First of all, the reason why Social Security looks at the work you've done in the last 15 years is because for purposes of relevance, that is the time period that they have established that is pertinent to your case, because that's the most recent type of work you've done. Think about it. If you're 45, 46 years old, Social Security could care less about work you did when you were 18 coming out of high school. Those facts are irrelevant. They're looking at the work that you've done in the last 15 years. Now, work is typically categorized into 3 categories: unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled. Now, for purposes of our discussion, remember one thing. If the work that you've done was unskilled, there are no skills to transfer. And let me pause for a second and talk about transferable. The reason why Social Security wants to know about the work that you've done in the past, because they want to know, have you acquired certain skills that could be transferred to other jobs? Let me give you a good example. If you're a cashier, what's a good skill that you have as a cashier? You handle money. So then you ask yourself, if I'm a person and I can only do a sit-down job, are there any sit-down jobs out there that requires a skill or where a skill of handling money could be helpful? Now, some of you would say, there's no sit-down jobs. Oh, please, yes there are. A toll collector. That's a sit-down job. Contrary to popular belief, most of that, I don't know if you realize it, but they're sitting. A ticket taker, because you're taking money and you're handing tickets. Those jobs typically are sit-down jobs. The reason it's important to remember skills is that they want to determine whether or not you've got something that you acquired from one job that you can take to something else. Now, let's go back to what we were talking about before. There are no transferable unskilled jobs, meaning you can't get any skills from an unskilled job and transfer it to another unskilled. So if it's been determined that you have worked at unskilled jobs, take that out of the equation. Skilled and semi-skilled are kind of tricky, because Typically, semi-skills means you've acquired a certain skill, but it's just not highly complex to learn that skill. And those are usually the jobs where you're getting skills that you can use for other things, like I said, with handling cash and cashiers. Now, skilled work typically requires a greater degree of complexity. Think about an engineer. Think about an attorney. Think about a doctor. Think about a job that is so hyper-technical that now you have to ask yourself, is that job skill transferable to any other jobs outside of that type of arena? Now, don't get me wrong. I have a skill set that could probably, some of the things I have could easily be transferred to like a legal assistant or a legal secretary or a legal paralegal. But if you notice, those are very hyper specific jobs as opposed to a multitude of jobs. Like if you say, I have a medium job that requires me to handle money, and I say, well, I have a transferable skill of being able to handle money. That skill I could transfer to all kind of jobs in the light level and in the sedentary level. Okay? So keep those three things in mind I'm talking about. When Social Security is trying to determine whether or not you can do any other work, they are looking at your limitations first. In other words, they're going to ask themselves, with all the problems that you have, how are you limited? How are you limited in your ability to stand, sit, walk? How are you limited in your ability to concentrate, focus, and do tasks? And once they have what we call a residual functional capacity, which is basically in RFC, a breakdown of what your limitations are, they look at your age to see how old you are, they look at your education, then they look at your work experience, and they take all of that information collectively to rely upon to determine whether or not there is any other works that you can do in the national economy. I hope this video helped out. I know the grids can be very confusing, and I encourage you to speak to a Social Security representative if you have specific questions about your case and whether the grids can be applicable to you. I hope this helped you out. As always, keep the questions coming. And again, this is Attorney Anthony Reeves, and I thank you for joining me with another edition of Q&A Social Security Disability Today.